to Atlantic Business Magazine's Take 5 with the Top 50 CEOs. I'm Krista Hand, and I'm the Managing Partner for Grant Thornton in New Brunswick. We're a presenting sponsor for the Top 50 CEOs. Today I'm joined by Lydia Bugden, who's the CEO and Managing Partner of Csuite McKelvey. As the first female CEO of a major law firm in Atlantic Canada, Lydia is leading Csuite McKelvey at a pivotal time in the legal profession. Proud of its history, yet forward-focused, Csuite McKelvey is investing in human capital and innovation to shape its future. Lydia, what does it mean to you to be the first female CEO of a major law firm here in our region? And maybe a second part to that question is there any additional pressures that you feel? Because I would say that, me included, you're now a role model for many.
Actually, it's funny, when I think about that question, didn't come into throwing my name in the hat for CEO thinking it was, sort of a first for our region. More, it just felt the right age and stage for me in terms of my career. I don't think there's added pressure because of the CEO. Certainly being a woman in the legal profession, and I would say professional services, as you are too, still male dominated. So I think the thinking of being out there and sort of setting the stage for others to follow has been something that's been part of my career from the beginning. But it ended up being a really happy circumstance when I became CEO, and then people started to think about it, and we all sort of thought, oh, this is a first for our region. It wasn't just a male, I should say, it wasn't just a female response. It was an overwhelmingly positive response from as many men in our community, and particularly in our profession, or my profession, as it was female. And I think that was probably one of the nicest outcomes of taking on the role.
That's wonderful. And I'm going to build on that a little bit. So yes, shifting gears. So that C-suite role. So I'm going to guess that you would have, gone to law school and with the goal of, being in practice, and then maybe share a little bit about how you decided to throw that hat in the ring and what brought you to the C-suite.
Yeah, it's actually not a common role for lawyers. Probably more in the accounting world, you see people going in through CFO and then CEO. When I started in law school, there was no such thing as a CEO of a law firm. There wasn't as many of the merged firms back then, and so really needing that type of infrastructure in a law firm environment wasn't thought about. But I started actually very early in my career. I was in-house, so I was in a corporate environment rather than actually growing up in a private firm. And then when I came back to private practice, management and increased lawyer involvement in law firm management was just becoming more and more common. And so I always had a piece of that pie. I always was engaged in some aspect of our firm management. And so it just actually was a build. And by that I mean I was an associate, what we call an associate practice manager. So taking care of the feeding, the care and feeding of our corporate associates when I was in early practice. And then I ended up being managing partner of this Halifax office before throwing my name in for the CEO. So it actually was a build over time, but it wouldn't have been something that I would have come out of law school thinking I was going to do, that's for sure.
But there's probably a period where, you're coming up through the ranks, so you have those coworkers, and then when you move into more of an administrative leadership role, all of a sudden you might become that boss. And so there's sort of two roles that you play. And I'd love to hear about how you balance and navigated that change.
Actually, it's funny. You would think that would be a difficult transition. I think it was probably worked in my favor in the sense that I had been in the trench. A lot of the people now that are sitting on my board or throughout our region are taking on significant roles, whether with clients or in our offices. They either would have been colleagues that I worked with quite closely over the years, or some of them were classmates from law school. So I think the added benefit of actually being in the trench together, people understanding my leadership style, my approach to problem solving probably is a help rather than a hindrance in terms of trying to balance that co-worker, co-partner, or no such thing as a co-partner, I should say, just a partner in a firm, and then sort of putting that CEO hat on every once in a while. So I actually think our business is very much based in relationship, and having those long-standing relationships with your partners was very helpful in taking on this role.
And I'd love to learn a little bit more about, how you're showing up with your leadership. So certainly one thing that we can see, and you and I would be, in this privileged position where we get to, look under the covers, probably for many businesses in our region. And something that we can see when you have a long-standing business is maybe that they might, sit on their laurels or become complacent. But I know that Csuite McKelvey is doing lots of things to also innovate and prepare for the future. And I'd love to hear about how you're navigating that.
Well, it's interesting. I think one of the things that did prompt me to think about taking on the role of CEO when I did in 2015 was the dramatic change that I was seeing in the profession. So for years, I would have said, at that point I had been a lawyer for 23 years. I would say from 0 to 15 in my career, everything had been done and looked and felt exactly the same. And then the acceleration of change that last 8 years or so, and increasing ever since, was one of the reasons that I thought this is a great opportunity to sort of, change gears myself and do something new. I would step back for a moment and say, notwithstanding that we have been around for a long time, our Halifax office, our Nova Scotia roots go back to the time of Confederation, and similarly in other provinces, we have long-standing roots and client relationships. But I think we've always considered ourselves leaders, and so when it came time that we were seeing change and feeling the winds of change, particularly for our clients and in our profession, we jumped on that. So we talk about being inspired by our history, but empowered by our future. And by that I mean, we know that we've been fortunate to grow with what I would say the builders of our region, who, as they've built this region and gone beyond. But at the same time, you can only do that if you keep up. So one of the things that we talk a lot about and we've invested a lot in, and our people are invested in, is what we call practice innovation. So same client service, thinking about the client's problems up front, but a very different delivery model than I would have been taught a number of years ago. And that actually is invigorating, all aspects of our business. And it's not just our younger cohort of people here. It's actually the most senior to our newest entrants into the profession are thinking about how they do things differently. And so that keeps us fresh. And our clients are talking that way too. We were using terminology, in terms of practice innovation. We talk about practice pricing differently. We talk about process management, which law firms would have never talked about before, project management. So all of those things are actually bringing a new dimension to our profession.
I've had the absolute privilege to be shoulder to shoulder with some of your fellow partners in making a difference in the community. And I know that that's really, a strong value that you guys hold. And I think you ask all of your lawyers to be supporters in the community. And I just love to hear a little bit more about that culture and why that's so important at STUMAC.
I think, it's a macro and a micro issue for us in the sense of, as an individual, our profession certainly speaks to the giving back in a way. And I think our training allows us, and we're often viewed as individuals who can bring something to an organization. And by that, you often see us being asked to sit on boards because of our background, the legal acumen, understanding of a governance model. So that's an easy. But I think, there's a passion that comes with being engaged in organizations, and we see that in our people as well. So on the individual level, we do encourage people to give back where they really feel that their passions take them. But on a macro level, as I often say to our people, we have a very large footprint in Atlantic Canada. So collectively, we can make a difference. And that is what we try to do. And so when we think about our commitment to the education, institutions of higher learning in this province, we think about child and youth strategies, whether it's youth programs or shelters. And we think about the healthcare sector. Those are meaningful engagements that will change the dial on the communities in which we live and practice. And so, we come at it from two different levels. From an individual level, we encourage everybody to find, where they feel comfortable giving back. From a macro level, we really do try to make a difference and support those organizations that are going to have a lasting impact on the communities in which we live and practice.